I speak as I am, Jean, Lord of Joinville, Seneschal of Champagne, because what I saw still troubles my sleep. In 1241 I stood in King Louis's great court in Anjou, a hall bright with cloth of gold and a sea of steel. Torches wavered in the small sounds. Cups set down, spurs knocking, rose and fell like a tide. I had seen feasts, never so many nights under one roof. Within that brightness lay the shadow that binds this tale. The king had fallen sick, so sick that even the boldest whispered he was dying. I went to the chamber where he lay, pale as linen, breath counting itself like a miser. Ladies stood with bowls of hot water and folded cloths. A priest murmured the prayers that teach the soul to loosen its grip. Then one lady, thinking to spare us, lifted a white sheet to cover his face. "Not yet," I said, shocking myself. It was a small rebellion against despair. Before anyone could answer, God broke in. The king's eyes opened. He asked for the cross. I saw his mother, Queen Blanche, cover her mouth and fail to hide a cry. She wept not as queens do, but as mothers do when a child is taken. To swear that cross is to walk toward the grave with one's eyes open. He took it anyway. He was not dramatic. He was stubborn. "If I live," he said, "it will be for God. If I die, it will be in his will." The chamber changed. We did not rejoice. We grew still, like men who hear a bell whose rope they themselves have pulled. I thought of my people at Joinville, the vineyards, the river. I knew I would follow him. It was not courage. It was a fear of being small when I had been measured. In the days that followed, nobles spoke softly. Some counseled delay. Others counted lances as if war were a ledger. A priest told me holiness grows in silence. I told him holiness also needs a road. I was already spending coin I had not yet borrowed, paying in advance for a vow not yet spoken. When the king sat upright again, he sent for his brothers. They came, grave as judges, and one by one took the cross. On an evening thick with candle smoke, I knelt and vowed. I did not look at the king. I looked at my hands, the same that held my father's as he died. I promised what those hands could not guarantee, my service wherever he marched. It felt like signing my name at the bottom of a page I had not read. I trembled, not quite with fear, and not quite with joy. Word ran through the court like wind through wheat. Men slapped shoulders and later stared into corners. Queen Blanche's eyes told me she had counted every step, and found none that returned her son. A vow born at death's door drags death with it. It does not let go when the body rises. So we began not with drums but with silence. A mother mourning for a living son, a king who had looked at the dark and would not blink, and me, a lesser lord trying to stand tall enough to be of use. If you think vows are made in heat, you are half right. Mine was forged in cold air under the gaze of God, cooled in the shock of being still alive. From that hour, I belonged to the cross and to the man who reached for it as for breath. I would go where he went and answer for what I could not. That is how our reckoning began. Easter 1248 came like a tolling bell. I put my house in order as a man shutters windows before a long winter. I settled debts, counted rents twice, and set aside alms of those who would miss my bread. I feasted my vassals, for a lord who asks others to march should first fill their bowls. We drank, argued over small wrongs, forgave what we could, and I gave each man a token to remember whom he served. My sister asked whether God needed me more than my people did. God needs nothing, I said, but the king does, and I gave my word. She kissed my brow and told me to keep my oath and my temper. I left at dawn while the village slept, because I could not bear a procession of tears. Eggs morts met me with the smell of pitch and new wood. The harbor the king had raised like a door, now open to us. I sailed with 9 knights, 10 men who trusted one another more than the sea. For days our ship rose and fell like pennants. We held mass on the deck. The wind snapped the vestments like banners. The pilot said the sea has 2 languages, one for those who listen and one for those who do not. I listened and learned how ropes complain and hulls pray. Cyprus lifted from the water like a promise and yielded like a shopkeeper. We bought grain, fodder, nails, everything that keeps an army honest. Then I learned how quickly a purse can test faith. I had spent more on honor than on prudence. My chest rang hollow. My men began to speak of serving elsewhere, by which they meant with someone who could pay on time. Loyalty wears thin like a strap when coin thins. I went to the king's quarters with a tongue too dry for courtesy. Louis did not sit on a dais. He stood among his clerks, reading lists with his finger. He heard me without offense, then did what makes men love him. He retained me himself, his own seal on my service, his own hand that counted the coins. "You shall not be the poorer for having followed me," he said. I left with reddened cheeks and a purse that finally had a voice. Cyprus became a forest of masts and a market of rumors. Nights arrived polished bright, and grew dull in waiting. Smiths hammered. Mules brayed at prices that climbed each week. Priests argued about abstinence, an exception for those who fought. The king walked the quays with a stride that accused idleness. Every tally miscounted because more ships arrived by the hour. Councils formed in divisions with them. Some urged a safer road. Season the army, bend toward Syria, take harbors and a slow ascent inland. Others, led by the king's brother, pressed to the throat, Cairo. A serpent is killed by the blow to the head. They said, naming courage prudence. I kept my counsel. A vow born from a deathbed is heavy. Would boldness honor it or waste it? Louis listened, weighed, and chose. To Egypt, he ordered. I did not know whether I wanted caution or glory. I only knew that following him felt like standing on a well's rim and trusting the rope. Drums thudded, and the camp tilted toward the sea. When the fleet stood out together, the horizon made a black hedge of sails. We had left home. Now we left safety, and the ship slid forward as if pushed by prayer. We came to Egypt in a hush before a blow. From the water, Damietta looked harmless, a brown ribbon, a fringe of palms. Then kettle drums began, hooves in the chest, and our horns answered. The surf judged us. Boats slewed, or snapped, men cursed and begged in the same breath. I told my knights to jump and plant their lances upright in the sand, a hedge against the first rush. I went over the side, swallowed salt, rose gagging. The first step on Egypt was mud pretending to be earth. Egyptian horse swept the strand, bright helmets, coats like fish. Arrows came like wasps. Raoul took one to the thigh and pulled it free like a splinter. Our line shuddered, then steadied. The charge met iron. A hymn began, ragged but brave. Downshore I saw the king's banner, wet but high. Louis held his bridle, jaw set for work, not show. Men in mail went down under the undertow, a sin to drown with so much courage on. We hauled 3 out by belts and left 2 to the sea. I noticed blood only where it thickened mud, and despised myself for counting. War makes you tally what should not be counted. All morning I expected Egypt's weight to fall on us. Yet the enemy moved in fragments, as if waiting on orders that did not come. Later we heard a pigeon sent to rouse a sick sultan. God knows. What I saw was a city that did not shut its gate. By noon our boats and ropes made a trembling bridge. Across it we found a Nile bridge uncut, storehouses open, houses half abandoned, as if a breath had blown the people out. We entered Damietta like tenants into a house whose lord had fled. The king forbade pillage, as if we were guests and not conquerors. I walked past baskets of dates, bolts of cloth caught on nails, a child's toy in a doorway. We sang a Te Deum in a courtyard while pigeons circled, and my gratitude felt like a man standing on an open road with fog ahead. Easy doors make hard roads. Then came councils, always councils. The season urged Alexandria. Take the coast, make the sea your ally, salt the victory and keep it. The king's brother pressed Cairo. Strike the head and the body dies. I listened and felt like a traveler with a river at his back and no bridge ahead. The city's surrender had given us triumph without a lesson. We had a prize and not yet a plan. Louis heard all with the patience that makes men love and fear him. He asked of grain, of the river's moods, of the strength of horses and heat. He prayed, or at least grew quiet enough to hear prayer. Then he chose, as if the answer had always lain under his hand. To Cairo, I bowed and felt my stomach drop like a bucket down a well. Glory drinks hard and leaves men thirsty. That night, I lay awake in a house someone else had built, hearing our drums and, far off, the thin bells of a mosque. I did not doubt the king. I doubted my strength to answer his decision. At first light we counted boats and baked bread, the two sacraments of an army. The Nile looked broad and possible, the way danger often does. I told my men to oil leather and keep their tongues from boasting. A vow was light on the lips and heavy on the shoulders. We had taken a city. Now we were pointed at a throne. We followed the river's elbow toward Mansoura until the walls faced us like a clenched jaw. We raised mangonels and rams, stitched towers from greenwood, and laid causeways of casks and reed. By day we built. By night our fires made a false city around the true one. Greek fire arrived as brightness. A pot arced and fell hissing, and the world became noon. Flame ran like oil and then climbed against the wind. Men who had laughed at tales of it stopped, for it found the chinks of mail, and water fed it like wine. One jar burst on our turret. The planks turned to torches. A cross on a shield glowed as if the paint itself prayed. We heaped sand, threw cloaks, flung earth with helmets. Anything but water. The air tasted of vinegar and pitch. A second pot whistled and split, chasing itself in bright streams that turned corners. A boy from Champagne, too new to fear properly, stamped as at kitchen coals. He fell with his foot alight. Bertrand and I smothered it with a tent sheet, while he bit leather to keep from crying. Discipline trembled. Runners at a watchpost buckled, a gap opening like a mouth. I gathered my 10 and made them kneel where the heat pressed the eyes shut. We prayed quickly and rose with better faces. Batter, I told them, not shoot. Their shields laugh at arrows. The wall does not laugh at stones. We hauled the ram forward and made a little thunder of our own. Then the gate spilled horsemen. They came in a wash, lances leveled, calling God's name in Arabic while we answered in Latin. The first spear bit through my shield and skidded along my ribs. I stayed up by habit. The second took me from the saddle. The ground struck truth out of me and rang my head. A hoof lifted to end me. I decided I would not look away. A shadow crossed it, and the hoof swerved. I forced my knees under me, expecting a squire. It was the king, tall on a wet horse, visor up, eyes plain and angry as a father's when a child runs into the street. "Close up," he called, not magnificently, but as a man calls to bar a door. His sword was not high. It was where it could work. Men who had been ready to remember business elsewhere remembered instead that they loved him. Lines knit. The horsemen broke on us and left us bleeding but standing. Afterward the sky brown to black, and we counted who could still count. My priest John, face streaked with soot, had marked a knot of their captains, 8 by his tally, beckoning our line like gamblers. I told him to hold and let stones answer. He crossed himself and spurred like a fool bred from saints. He burst through them, knocked one from the saddle with his staff, and the rest fled. When he came back, he looked surprised to be alive. Shrove Tuesday came with a north wind and the smell of scorched carp. We ate little and confessed much. While ashes were marked for those who begged early, a gust snapped the point of the king's banner, so clean it looked cut. Men stared as if the sky had spoken. The king touched the cloth, smiled thinly at the omen, and ordered a new spear. "Fast and work," he said. We did both, for fear, for pride, for him. The river taught us what victory costs when victory delays. Corpses drifted in 3s and 10s. Christians and Saracens kneaded into the same brown water until the Nile forgot our quarrels. Eels fattened, their backs looping between faces we had known at dawn. We hauled a few ashore. Then we stopped, because pity has a limit that hunger does not. Lent came and we counted salted fish like sins. Bread thinned. Wine met more water than grape. At dusk a rumor ran faster than a horse. The Turks had dragged galleys overland across a tongue of marsh and cut our string to Damietta. It sounded like tavern boasting until we saw a mass where land should be. From that day the price of everything obeyed fear. A loaf cost a spur. A measure of beans became a quarrel. A mule fetched the price of 2. Men strapped their purses to their skin. Sickness took the tent lines next. We called it camp sickness because naming a thing pretends endurance. Gums softened and bled, so that bread tasted of iron. Teeth loosened like tiles in a frost, then fell. Legs blotched with shadow and turned hard as oak. The smell in the alleys of tents changed from sweat and horse to something sourer, the slow rot of the living. Men who had shouted for the charge now asked God not to wake them. I did not stand exempt. One morning I tried to lift a bucket and found the bucket understood me better than my arms did. The ground tilted. The river leaned toward me, and I lay down to keep from falling into it. My priest John, gone as a rake, came to my bed and said he would offer mass and thanks that I still swore like a soldier. He dressed with fingers that could not find the buttons. He began the mass and fainted halfway through the gospel. Squire splashed him. I told him not to. If a man rests in God, do not drag him back to our mess. John rose, spoke the words again, and fell at the Sanctus, the chalice unbroken only because it loved him. The third time he finished. I have heard bolder sermons. I have not seen braver worship. The council weighed the body against the soul and found the body heavier. Envoys came with good news in ugly clothes. Damietta for Jerusalem. I wanted to say yes because my men's legs were turning black, and my own tongue felt like wood. The king listened as if listening could make food. He asked after prisoners, after the sick, after the horses whose backs were bone. Night fell sharp. Orders came quiet as confession. We would withdraw to the river, embark in darkness, and lay our fires in false rows. Carry the dying first. No cries if a cart stuck. Do not forget the relics. Men kissed the ground where they would not die and shoulder what weight they could. I tied a strip of cloth around my arm, so that if I went down my men would know whom they lifted. We moved with the river's caution. Oars muffled, wheels slow. A host reduced to breath and decision. A vow binds in triumph. It binds harder in retreat. I had wanted holiness to be a banner. That night it was a hand over a mouth, so panic would not speak. The Nile slid black as a priest's sleeve while God kept his counsel and the dark kept our secrets. We stole down river in a hush that had weight. Oars creaked. The pilots hissed when a blade flashed. Fires dotted the banks. Arrows began as stray bees and became a swarm, thudding into wood and shield. The Nile laid their feathers flat. For crescent galleys came hard from shadow, beaks up, drums beating. Our boatmaster, seeing capture nearer than dawn, tried for the bank. I caught him. To the fleet, I said, not the shore. Mercy's on land. Obey, I told him, and he did, sulking. A grapnel bit. We hacked lines. A second hook found the stern. I looked at what weighed us. A coffer of coin, a chest of relics wrapped in silk, my mail bag. Holiness is heavy. I fed the river handfuls of silver. Then, praying, I tipped the relic chest overboard. The silk bellied and sank. I felt lighter and sick. We sheared off, but pain clenched my throat like a fist. Swallowing became war. My tongue dried to leather. Words stuck like bone. My men asked for orders I lacked. I croaked and spat blood that looked black on my glove. Priest John stood. An arrow found him under the shoulder. He sat, blinked twice, and lay down as decorously as he had always lived. I put my hand on his hair, because that was all I could still do. Then we were boarded by shouters of horse and clove. I raised my hands. A Mamluk with olive wood eyes touched his breast, then mine. No killing if none were needed. He looked at my mouth. From a skin, he poured a sour drink into a cup. I could not swallow. He tilted it into the pocket under my tongue and held my jaw until the ache relented and the world widened. We were prisoners in order, counting before cruelty. Names, knives, boots, pens for men who had only lost. Food came hot and spiced, sat like a stone, then passed as a draft worked. I thanked God for an enemy's medicine. The city turned uneasy. Rumor moved. The Sultan sick, Emirs angry, wages unpaid. One night the south reddened. We smelled burning gum and grain. In the morning ash lay on the water. By noon power had thinned. We heard, then saw. The tower where the Sultan hid himself smoked. He burst out when not a faithful was pressed to the river, and speared there until the water shivered cold. Then hospitality that remembered its knife. Bread, dates, and promises like bridges of words. The new masters wanted coin, peace, and our leaving. Bargains are cleaner when both are tired. I counted among the ransom because the king's seal opened purses fast. They let us wash in lemon water. They returned to me the knife of a man, I had not saved, and called it kindness. I kissed the hilt, marching us to boats. The Mamluk with the olive eyes found me. He touched his breast again. I did the same. You saved me, I said through a throat that remembered. He shrugged as if tilting a water jar. I thought of Priest John, and decided mercy is a wheel that turns where it will. We pushed off, lighter in chain than in heart, and the same river bore us toward a reckoning paid in coin and years. We came back to Damietta not as victors, but as debtors to breath. Ransom paid, chains filed. The king walked among us with a face made older by resolve. He listened like a confessor. How many sick? How much grain? How many nails? Every answer said the same thing. France waited. This land gnawed. The legate arrived with Rome in his mouth. Sire, the realm bleeds. Your mother is old. Enemies read your absence as permission. They called it wisdom to go home. I called a door closing on people who had trusted our banner. Louis assembled us in a long house that smelled of another family's bread. He asked each to speak. Some proposed a season, winter in Acre, spring to France. Others wanted ships by morning. When my turn came, I went to my knee and found my mouth disobedient. Sire, I said, you have spent more treasure than any Christian king on this shore, but not yet your own purse. If we leave now, men will say you sold God vows short and kept your goal long. The room drew breath as if I had slapped a saint. The legate stared as if a dog had found a voice. The king did not flare. He looked at me steady, measuring. Later alone, he asked, why set yourself against all the wise men of France? I answered would have been burning my coat. Because I love you, and love speaks plain where fear trims words. He closed his eyes, pleased by a costly truth. By morning, his answer was decision. We stay, he said, until we built what our coming broke, and made a wall where we opened a door. He wrote orders that were prayers. Pay the garrisons of Caesarea, Jaffa, Acre, hire masons, stack lime and stone. Keep watch by Rhoda, punish theft like treason. Then he opened his own chests, one stewards whispered about, and counted coin onto the table until the scales bent. He retained me richly and said, spend this on what stands when we sail. I thought of my bluntness and felt shame and gratitude twist like rope in one hand. I swore to spend as if the gold were his breath. News came like thunder from far mountains. The Tartars had taken cities with dust storm speed and sent letters folded like knives. Give us tribute, accept peace through us, or expect our shadow. Scribes read and swallowed. Some urged alliance, some anathema. The king answered by building faster. A mailed hand cannot stop wind, but walls blunt men. Work became our liturgy. We woke to chisels and laid down a mortar. The king walked the lines, corrected measures, praised a plumb line truer than sermon. He judged quarrels under a sun that made liars sweat, returned a stolen hen with a lecture that hurt more than a fine, and laughed when boys sewed a sleeping night's skirts to the ground. Justice and mirth in one camp, hard as flint, warm as bread. At night I wrote accounts and prayed for those who had sailed or died. I dreamed of the Mamluk with the olive eyes handing me water, and woke willing to believe God loves even our enemies more than our stories do. Staying did not feel like triumph. It felt like keeping faith with stones and widows. And sometimes, when the sea lay quiet and the walls stood a little higher, it felt like hope paid in coin. Louis did not speak of holiness that spring. He practiced it with a shovel. I watched him take off his gloves and help lower bodies into earth by the walls of Caesarea, then press the soil flat with his boot, so no dog would nose it up. He prayed aloud for men whose names he did not know, and then turned to measurements. Ditch 3 feet deeper. Parapet 2 hand higher. Tower stairs widened so a wounded man could be carried without bruising his head. You would not have known he had once dreamed of Cairo. He dreamed in lime and stone now. We rode the line each morning. At Jaffa, he corrected a mason with a gentleness that stung. At Acre, he sat in judgment and sent a thief to labor in irons until a grain store made its count again. Once, boys sewed a snorer's hem to the ground. He woke, lurched, and fell. Louis laughed like a boy himself, then fined the culprit's 2 hens for wasting thread. Justice and mirth walked the same lane. I think that is why men worked for him long after glory had left the camp. Merchants brought news like weather. One day a Genoese with smoke on his breath swore Baghdad had fallen to the Tartars, and the Caliph, rich beyond reason, had been wrapped in carpets and beaten, his treasure poured like yellow sand he could not eat. The story went through the market like a chill. Louis listened and said only, "Gold is a poor roof." Then he ordered more tiles, more nails, more cisterns, as if the answer to rumor were duration. Weeks made habits. We buried, built, punished, pardoned. I learned the names of the men who hauled lime, the woman who baked bread without ash, the boy who carried water as if running a race he could win. When pay wavered, the king opened his own chest again, and even those who disliked him admitted the man did not spend other people to spare himself. At length a local lord said out loud what had been true in their eyes. His presence brought less gain than risk now that the walls stood and the treasuries thinned. The legate took courage from their caution. I felt my will soften like wax and heat. Love is not the same as wisdom. Love often asks too much of the beloved. The king called us and looked like a man who had been awake all night, counting not coin but consciences. After Easter, he said, "We sail." There was no drama in it, only relief and the ache that follows. We heard Mass, kissed stones, and spoke to the dead without ceremony. I walked the walls at dusk and laid my hand on each new seam, as if blessing a child I would not see again. The sea sent a clean wind. Our ships showed their ribs like cattle ready for a road. We left with fewer songs than we had brought, but I think we were stronger men for knowing the difference between a vow and a victory. France received us with bells and with reckoning. Years passed. Children grew into the armor their fathers had abandoned. Then came 1270 and the news that Louis had died at Tunis, whispering Jerusalem as fever unfastened him. I went out and leaned against a wall until the stone found my weight and kept it. That night I slept and dreamed him young, walking ashore where the nets never tore and shovels were not needed. He smiled and did not call me to arms, only to memory. In 1309, grown old myself and greedy for truth, I began to write what you have heard, not to polish a legend, but so you may firmly believe a man can be both stubborn and good, and that holiness, when disappointed of thrones, will build wells and walls and bury the nameless gently. If I have erred, it is in love.